Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome to a live stream. That's right. We're gonna be doing a live. I mean, it's we'll do a Bakhmut update. We'll do a look at all the map, but we're also gonna check out a bunch of videos from Russian MOD propaganda. We're gonna check out some Ukrainian profiles of their intelligence chief, and there's just gonna be a ton of stuff going on. There's a ton of stuff. So thank you guys. I'm thrilled to see you guys. But you guys know the deal, right? Well, if you guys have questions or comments, throw them in the chat. As always, I will definitely respond to super chats. Yeah, you guys know. You can also become channel members, get access to all those crazy emojis. Yeah. I deliberately tried to schedule this stream on a time that was going to be good for the largest number of my audience, right? US and European based. I see a bunch of guys from Germany and Monaco and Hungary. Reflection asking, can we watch combat footage? YouTube says that is a no-no, but I'm trying to figure out a way to fix that. Yeah. Ooh, we might talk about Russia. Yeah, we may talk about Russia's purge of all its senior officers. That's another good topic of discussion, certainly. Yeah. Shout out to the guy who's in Allen Basin, Colorado, who's using Starlink to live stream. Is it really that good? I've seen footage of Ukrainian forces using laptops like in the middle of the battlefield, real time like streaming drone footage, communicating with drones with like real time accuracy. So I don't know. I've heard they're using Starlink still. So I think I'm excited for the era where Starlink becomes great anywhere, then I can start to, I don't know, communicate, make my videos from like an RV somewhere or something. It's also funny to see there's a bunch of people in chat who are like, I didn't even know you live streamed at all. I do. Usually I do it during the week and honestly during like business hours in the US, like Friday afternoons, which is also like a time when a lot of people are busy, nobody wants to like, everyone wants to wrap up and get off work, not listen to a live streamer. So I appreciate all you guys seriously coming in. Yeah, definitely going to take a look at what's up with Prigozhin. Yeah, Joseph Rhodes asks, how do we see your streaming schedule? I'm trying to give you guys like 24 hours notice and set up a regular routine. It's a little tough. I try to stream either Fridays or Saturdays. And again, I'm experimenting with different times right now to see when you guys are around. Because obviously I don't want to stream to nobody, Maybe when I'm as big as Ninja, I can stream at like 8 a.m. to like noon on a weekday and still get like thousands of people. But I am many things. I'm definitely not an elite Fortnite player. So, ultimately, streaming is only fun if your audience comes down, Thank you, Cunningham, for urging me to rage quit. I just like that emoji. I assume that's why you put it, because it's a pretty hilarious emoji. Stefan asking, China's GDP down, raising risks for Taiwan. Interesting. So, the China-Taiwan thing, actually, this is not super on topic. Well, it's a national security thing. So, China and Taiwan China has a tough strategic problem in its face. And that is a couple of things. First off, yeah, a slowing economy is problematic for them. Here, let's talk a little bit. Okay. If you look at it, I punched into Google China population crisis. And China's population, right, likely to drop below 1 billion by 2080 and 800 million by 2100. And you may think that's still a lot of people, but it carries with it a systemic risk, because long before you see actual real declines in population, you're going to see the aging of a generation, right? So as the median age of China gets older, their ability to mobilize a large-scale population for a conflict is going to be reduced. And that is a huge problem, as we're seeing, right, for Russia, which has shown that modern warfare, it doesn't look like the first Gulf War, right? Where it's like 3 days, lightning invasion, high-tech GWiz equipment, and you high-five yourself after a week. You know, you're back home in a week. And China's looking and they're going, oh no, if we're going to take Taiwan, it's going to take us, you know, thousands of lives and potentially years, given the strength of Taiwan's allies and the sincerity of their commitment to defend the island. In addition to the fact that Russia, I mean, look at how hard a time Russia's having, and it is literally connected along tens of thousands of miles to Ukraine via land, right? It's not hard to get a troop from Russia to Ukraine. It's very hard to get a troop from China to Taiwan. So I say this because China realizes they need more people, and they're going to be running out of military age men very, very quickly. And their economy is going to have to devote more and more, just like Japan, and to an extent like the US. But the US is heading off this problem with immigration, basically, by having young workers immigrate into the country. US doesn't have this problem. But Japan is like, hey, we don't have, more and more of our young people are going to be, and our economic output is going to be supporting an aging non-working population. So you end up in these crises where the clock is sort of ticking. And I think for China, which also is economically, is sort of dependent on economic growth, I think it looks at what Russia has done and is like, hey, we actually may not be able to weather a sanctions regime comparable to Russia, right? Russia, at the end of the day, has a bizarre, almost by every other country standard, like obsession with national suffering that just like pales to every other country. Like they just thrive on the backs. Their country just grows on the backs of like tremendous, tremendous suffering on a population scale. Not that China can't too, but there's like this mandate of heaven thing that the Chinese population is like, we support the government because the government does good things. And when they don't make our lives better, we stop supporting them. It's like democracy with extra steps and a lot of suppression of freedom of speech and everything. All right. Anyway, that's a China-Taiwan assessment. I think so. Sorry, that doesn't actually answer your question. I think it generally would bode better for Taiwan, but China's clock is ticking in terms of its ability to launch a major military operation. And it's definitely learned a lot from watching Russia about what it really takes to invade even a smaller, weaker neighbor who has strong allies. And remember, the international regime supporting Taiwan way stronger than than Ukraine, right? Ukraine had like some vague promises and some bilateral agreements with a couple countries, but when the chips were down, everybody showed up for Ukraine, right? Well, China already has better friends. Anyway, Ohms, thank you for the $5. Is there a way to get Russian troops stuck in their own field fortifications? This is it. The short answer is probably not while they're on the defensive. They would get stuck if they were in their own field fortifications and were to transition to the offense. And the reason is because, like, it's like Germany in the First World War, right? They built these trenches with, in Russia's case, lots of minefields and barbed wire and pre-planned fires that canalized advancing Ukrainian troops in such a way that makes them vulnerable. But if Russia was to try to pass through those minefields, they would have some advantages in that they don't have to learn the hard way where the mines are located. But the mines still don't discriminate. And it's very time and cost consuming to clear minefields en masse. So they themselves are sort of trapped behind the defensive structure they've built. Okay, Jesus, UCSB. Oh man, all right. Tankers lead the way. Army 90 kilos. I mean, I was an MP, but yeah, I have love and respect for the tankers. You guys are always a little scrambled in the head, but we love you just the same. Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Jesus. All right. Oh yeah, guys, and do hit the like button. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe. You know, be cool. But yeah, definitely hitting the like button is going to help tell the algorithm that this is a good quality stream. And that I'm not like spamming nonsense. All right. What do you guys say we take a peek at some maps? Right? We'll see if there's any updates. Right? Okay. Man, I'm loath to say it. I might become a third monitor guy. I have like 4 screens open on my second monitor. Okay. All right. Let's take a look. And just gonna tuck myself right there. Okay. Oh, it's already in English. I love it. All right. Any updates? Not since this morning. Minor frontline updates. All right. Let's see if we can find a better one. This is just news. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at this. This is good. The combat map always has the latest updates. So we're seeing a lot of shelling from 14 hours ago, and then interesting, some explosions reported in different regions. David Abels, thank you. Okay, let's see. Explosions reported in Sumy. Oh wow, interesting. Okay. Night missiles launched in Belgorod. I think we can infer what's going on there. Yeah, what's interesting to me about, to whatever extent there are recent developments, is that, again, we've heard that Ukraine has slowed its offensive and is almost engaged in like not quite going back to the drawing board in terms of shaping operations, but some of its operations appear to be shaping like. And when I say that, they're fixing the enemy in locations, they're targeting a lot of infrastructure. Again, I've really maintained my theory that when Ukraine had the Freedom of Russia Legion go into Belgorod and just do these like minor raids, it was clear that they were using U.S. equipment. And the U.S. had been very clear in public that that equipment was not to be used inside Russian sovereign territory, right? They carved out a few exceptions. They said, hey, HIMARS against targets, probably that we greenlight is my theory. Like one-offs, we'll let you use. But you can't have them use U.S. equipment inside Russia. That's our red line. And Ukraine violated that. But obviously there's no support from Congress to reduce the total aid to Ukraine. Therefore, what I think the Pentagon did is said, because you got to understand, Army officers, they don't take disrespect well, okay? And I say this, who was one, because like the mystique of being a commander is part of what gives your command authority. People trust you because, in part, you have this commander's mystique. So they don't take kindly to being disrespected, especially blatantly. So I suspect the Pentagon said, run your offensive. We're not going to help you. No intel, no strategic planning, nothing. Good luck. And so the Ukrainian generals ran this offensive basically blind because they have very limited intelligence infrastructure in terms of, they don't have, there's no Ukrainian spy satellites overhead. They're U.S. satellites, probably analyzed by U.S. analysts, summarized into targeting packages by the U.S., translated into the Ukrainian and handed to the Ukrainians with like grid coordinates, like place HIMARS here. And without that, their offensive really struggled. And so I think after a time, the Pentagon was like, okay, are you sorry? And Ukraine was like, yeah, we're sorry. Because you notice we haven't heard anything from the Freedom of Russia Legion in a minute. And I think that's not an accident. I think Ukraine was like, okay, we're sorry. No U.S. equipment inside Russia. And the U.S. was like, okay. And so I think they're back to the drawing board because in many ways they are. I think the U.S. is now providing Ukraine. This is a theory, by the way. This is a theory that I'm sort of inferring from a combination of these statements, the strategies we're seeing, and the changes in strategy now, right? We're seeing the Ukraine target very well supply depots, munitions dumps, troop movement points, and we're seeing their offensive slow in pace a lot. And so I think we're seeing is much more fixing, much more support. I think the offensives they take are well prepared for. I think they have good intel that's getting better. That's my theory. Anyway, AXJ Killers, thanks for the drink fund. Whoa. Okay. Cerny asks, just finished the Ukraine Matters live stream. He's the one that represents my view on Russia perfectly. He's Estonian. Tell me honestly, do we Eastern Europeans seem a bit too hawkish to you? Thanks for your wonderful work. I think that so Eastern Europe is as a country, or as a region, excuse me, in a weird spot. One, they have a totally different history with Russia than we do. One, that Russia is a much more imminent proximate threat. A small country that risks being dominated by his neighbor. Basically, small countries have an incentive to be more hawkish, as you say, because the larger countries, at the end of the day, like if there was a Russia-NATO fight, we'll say 85% of the fighting would presumably be done by the U.S. military. And that's not a dig. Like the total Ukrainian or Estonian army is, let me look this up, right? Estonian army active duty size. The Estonian army is 4,000 people, okay, on active duty, and another 200,000 reserve, right? U.S. military active duty size. The active duty U.S. military is 1.4 million, okay? So what you have this incentive to do if you have powerful allies and you want to achieve something geopolitically is you have to bark louder, if that makes sense, right? That's your best deterrence. And because you have less direct bite, whereas the U.S. has to sit there and go, okay, this is a nuclear power. They're comparable to us. Like Russia is the peer, right? Russia is a peer country in terms of its military capabilities. That's why I think Eastern Europeans, if this makes any sense, are more aggressive simply because they have to be to deter an enemy that large, whereas the U.S. has to be more calculated because the price of mistakes are way, 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 way higher. I hope that made sense. Okay, Dark George asks, have you noticed a continuous reduction in fires along the Western Front and Kherson and the Northern Front? I think it's highly indicative of Ukrainian counter-battery fire being very effective. I think you might be right, George, because General Popov also told us we're right. One of his chief complaints, and he was a commander of the 58th Combined Arms Army. Let's get him up here. Let's get him up on screen. Right, he was the commander of the 58th Combined Arms Army. Yeah, what did I spell it? In Zaporizhzhia, and one of his chief criticisms, it was a troop rotation, but also that Russia did not have enough effective counter-battery fires to stop Ukrainian artillery. And that would make sense because initially we heard Ukrainian artillery, right, early in the war, it was outnumbered. Now those reports don't seem to be as frequent. It seems closer to parity. Russian artillery seems to be way less accurate. Ukrainian artillery seems very, very, very precise. So counter batteries, the ability to silence these advanced guns, is essential. And again, when you have a high-level general who comes out and has recent field command experience and says, our counter battery fire sucks, I'm inclined to go, yeah, their counter battery fire probably sucks. All right. Let's see. Sorry, I want to try to make sure I get everybody. Thank you, Rob Ison. I'm surprised something like a minefield can hold up a modern army and its equipment. I thought we solved that problem 70 years ago. I would argue we haven't. Because think about, what is an IED, right? It's a mine. It is a mine. And the insurgencies in Iraq and Afghanistan, despite not being militaries in the conventional sense, despite not actually having military-grade mines, they DIY'd most of their IEDs. They used mines to put an L. I was in Afghanistan. Dude, we lost, man. The Taliban control Kabul. We took an L. And we lost because of IEDs, because we were unable to efficiently conduct demining. We couldn't ever really solve the problem. We could make the mines less dangerous with things like MRAPs, but they still got a mobility kill on a vehicle. And to clear minefields or to clear a route was a nightmarishly difficult experience. And if you found one IED, right, your entire 6-vehicle convoy would be stalled out for hours and hours and hours. It was crazy. And so I think, looking back, I think the signs were obvious that the mine problem, the minefield, modern military mines are extremely hard to counter. And basically, we were lulled into a false sense of security, the West, because we all signed a treaty that said mines are bad and we promise not to use mines. What we failed to account for the fact is that even if we don't use mines, someone else who doesn't share our deep concern for future civilians on the battlefield might just throw a bunch of mines down. And we realized that other people don't play by nice guy rules like the West. We suddenly found ourselves stuck having to solve this mine problem. Or in the US case, try to mitigate the effects of mines. Again, we're going to talk a little bit later on, and we're going to look at some videos of potential ways that I think the future of war, the future technology can create demining at scale. Sharp W, do you think Russia will use nukes if Crimea is in danger of falling? A cluster bomb's a game changer, yes or no? I don't think it would use nukes if Crimea was in danger of falling. And cluster bombs, I don't think they're a game changer. I think they're going to enhance Ukraine's ability to clear trenches and to soften targets prior to an assault. I think it's going to make it easier. But again, Ukraine doesn't need to clear more trenches. They need to break through Russian fortifications, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. Brian asks for razors. Oh, thanks. I was like, who's razors? I'm like, oh yeah, right, my beard. What happened to JDAMs? Haven't seen or heard anything about them being used. JDAMs, for those of you that don't know, is a joint direct attack munition. And it's a guidance kit that turns unguided bombs or dumb bombs into all-weather precision guided munitions using inertial guidance system and GPS. And it's a cheap way to take dumb bombs, make them smart bombs. Right? The issue, and obviously JDAMs, very, 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 very popular, given that they fit on pretty standard weapons for about $25,000, which is comparatively cheap. The thing is, JDAMs are effective because they need to be launched from aircraft. And without air superiority on either side, JDAMs can't be used, right? And this is, again, one of the other chief reasons that Ukraine's offensive has struggled so much is because they don't have air superiority. That's the other thing. NATO doctrine is called air-land battle. And a NATO brigade is equipped for, it's called something different now, but when it was designed, it was basically air-land battle. And I think it was full spectrum operations. Now it's something else. The point is, it hinged on having aircraft that could conduct air support, right? Aircraft to suppress enemy air defenses, aircraft, more importantly, to target enemy strong points, using smart weapons and JDAMs, conducting these forward like preparatory fires. But like close air support, guys, is close. Like imagine how different clearing a trench would be if you could put a round into, if you could put a JDAM into a machine gun position, into the trench you're trying to assault, right? It would be a different story. It wouldn't be that hard. But without air superiority, the whole thing sort of breaks down. Now you have to use tanks to clear things out, right? A trench is not very effective against if you don't have air superiority, or if the enemy has air superiority. Polly, great name. Just saw some news saying Ukraine's outshelling 2.5 times more than Russia now, which is a huge 180-degree change. That's pretty dope. I believe it. I believe it. And again, it's probably more accurate. So every shell, I think, is counting for more. Oh, interesting. Stephen Dueling, thanks. Checking out Stream Vote. Help your live streams manage questions and raise more money. Ooh, that sounds good. Yeah, because right now, you see, I'm like literally scrolling through the chat, and by the time I answer one question, there's like 3 more. Thank you, Sam Gallagher. Dunk on you, 23. Keep up the great work. Your insights are extremely useful and typically spot on with respect to geopolitical, strategic, and tactical situations in Ukraine. Salva Ukraini. Thank you. I appreciate it, man. I try my best, but even I get it wrong, man. This is the information space. Honestly, I tell my wife, if I ever get to a point where, you know, I live streaming and content creation, I don't want to do it anymore, you know, after the war ends, I always think I would want to write a book about like the rise of war influencers, and not like pat myself on the back, but like look at Igor Gherkin, look at all these guys who create information, not just report information, try to tease out information in the space, which is really challenging, but also the way that influencers influence war policy, right? And you know, it's not a secret. Like I've told people, the Ukrainian government, like they've reached out to me, and I'm certain they've done so with other English language creators, because we ensure people in our respective countries that care about Ukraine. And ultimately, that's the reason Ukraine gets all this aid. It's because people care about it. So, yeah, I would love to write a book on like the rise of social media and influence in combat. I think it'd be fun. I think like 10 people would read it, but you know, I'd send it to all my old professors and be like, you should teach this. All right. Andrew Turner asks, what are the top 3 ways you see this ending as a conflict? Yeah. All right. He acknowledges it. I know it's impossible to predict, but just for fun. Okay. My number one pick for how this ends. Russia controls slightly more of the Donbas than they started with. They use their control of the Donbas, and they pretend to recognize larger portions of Ukraine, like the Luhansk and Donetsk. Ukraine officially has the official position that the Donbas and occupied regions are a part of Ukraine, sovereign territory. That inability to control their territory precludes Ukraine from being a NATO member, and therefore Russia achieves some level of what it wants. You know, Ukraine ends up in a much better spot in getting almost back to the status quo ante, which is not a great win, but it ends up with a much more effective army. And yeah, I think that's my number one pick. Number 2 pick is Russia pivots to a defensive war, and really tries to lock in what they have now. Not really pushing hard, instead trying to make it as punishing as possible for Ukraine, and that Ukraine eventually realizes they can't continue to draw on their people, and eventually has to like sue for peace again with the status quo. And I think the third one is that the Russian public absolutely loses their minds. They are tired of the war. They see enough of their sons come back or not come back. And they're tired of the brutal sanctions regime that, you know, makes the ruble worthless and prevents them from connecting with the larger European community. And that eventually the Russian oligarchs, who are extra sick of it, say, go to the Kremlin and go, you need to stop. Come home, sign for whatever peace treaty you can get. This is over. So those are my 3 picks. I won't even rank them though. I think the occupied Donbas is my leader right now. Questionable Authority asked, would small tracked ROVs with metal detectors in front doing a Roomba impression, sending coordinates of metal back to central map help? Yeah, that's actually my theory as to what the eventual drone would be. It wouldn't just be a metal detector, because that you could counter pretty easily by just throwing pieces of scrap into any field where you want to also plant mines. What you would do instead was partner it, have it talk back to a machine learning algorithm that's been trained extensively on like a huge database of mines and concealed mines, and it learns the signature of them with a regular camera, an infrared camera, a magnetic camera, and it attempts to like look for those signatures, and it just tags when it has a 80% likelihood that this thing is a mine, right? So then they could get the rate of mines down low enough that you could just do a final check with a tank with a mine clearing device on it, just push it through, and suddenly you've got a cleared path. That's my thesis. All right. Thank you, SF Joe. Can you explain the difference of clearing trench and penetrating the line? So air required to penetrate. Yeah, exactly. So, right, clearing a trench is when your forces are inside the trench and you basically have to walk down the hallway, so to speak. It's very complicated because usually you also have forces outside the trench who are engaging the enemy. So you have to have your forces march through the hallway. You have other forces that are engaging the enemy and suppressing them as you march down the hallway fighting place by place. That is too close quarters for close air support. But what you have to do before that step is you have to go from being outside the trench to being in the trench, right? Somewhere. You have to penetrate the trench somewhere. And that is where precision guided munitions pay out, right? Because they can get, I mean, a good one has a, I mean, what's a JDAM have in terms of area? I think it can be within 23 feet, right? So you can get really close with these JDAMs. And that, imagine going, we want to penetrate, we want to cross into that trench line at that exact machine gun position. And then you put a guided munition right onto it, right? That, and you know it's going to hit, and then you push. That is how you can penetrate, right? And then you hop in, your clearing force hops in to the trench, right? They cross this open area, hop in, and then suddenly it's way harder to hold a trench that's being cleared. Mesty asks, USA wants Ukraine peace agreement until Russia attacks in the future again. F-16 training in Europe denied, etc. Do you agree? Okay, wait. USA wants Ukraine peace agreement until Russia attacks in the future again. Here's the thing with Russia, guys. The Russian military was exposed as being very hollow at the start of this. The Russian military now is like pretty gutted. Okay. You got to understand that like the Russian military was considered one of the top 3 militaries in the world in terms of its ability to do things at scale, right? There's only a handful of countries in the world that can go somewhere else and like truly invade another country. And Russia was one of them. Basically, Russia, France, the UK, the United States. That's pretty much it. Every other country cannot go anywhere and invade, right? Like the Chinese army cannot invade Africa at scale. They don't have the naval infrastructure. They don't have the ability to bring in supplies in a hostile environment. They're just not what we call expeditionary. And so the fact that Russia has lost huge portions of its advanced equipment, again, it's relying on just mass. But like if it wasn't fighting a neighbor, it would be useless, right? Like how would it even get these troops anywhere? So I think the US and NATO are very pleased to see Ukrainian forces just grinding Russian troops and material and remember, and officers and experience, right? They're just deleting it off the face of the earth. High casualty rates. They're down to just aging, out-of-date equipment. And at the same time, the U.S. and NATO are testing all of their combat vehicles, and they are learning everything. Hopefully, they're learning a lot about what the next war looks like. You know, F-16 training in Europe. I've heard the Dutch took the lead on it, man. They announced it at the NATO summit. I think it's going down, dude. Sam Gallagher, are the tactics fixing or culmination? Okay, so fixing and culmination are two like not quite terms to describe tactics. Fixing is a tactical task. Fix an enemy in a location, that's a tactical task. Culmination is a term that I think the Institute for the Study of War really likes. It refers to, I think we when we're planning would call it the end of one phase and the transition to another. So I think that probably that Ukraine has said, hey, the initial part of the offensive has culminated, right? We're transitioning to a new phase. And in this new phase, fixing is a key tactical task, as well as disrupting, enemy supply routes, and destroying enemy supply depots, blocking and creating obstacles, turning enemy supply routes, that sort of thing. Okay, Clumsy Snake. Gulf War Mikliks worked. Is there limited range of problem here, or are Russian mines resistant to them? Standard Miklik fired from 5 kilometers. I think it was just a scale problem. Remember, in the Gulf War, there was so much area that you could almost always go around, right? Like, you could drive a tank through open desert, you know? And Mikliks, they were good for the scale of mining that Iraq was doing, but they are not as good when the scale is just so much greater. Like, there was just not an appreciation for how many of these mines Russia has. They have just an absolutely bananas amount of mines, truly. So I think that's what it is. I think like the Miklik is just too intensive, right? One Miklik can clear I think like only a few hundred meters, right? For those of you that don't know, a Miklik, let's see if we can find it here. Mine clearing. Okay, sorry, I shouldn't be talking about it without pulling it up. Is a mine clearing line charge. This is a big, heavy rope made of C4, basically. I know. And what it does is the rope gets shot out of a thing, out of a rocket launcher. You can see there's a rocket, there's the rope. And it lands flat like this. And then the rope explodes, clearing out a big 1 tank wide's worth of area where you know for sure there's no mines because we just blew it up. The problem is it's limited. They can do 200 meters in length. Yeah, you can get about 200 meters from but an M58, right, mine clearing line charge can only do 100 meters. And they're large, heavy systems that have to be deployed to the vehicle towed trailer. There's a smaller version that can just breach a path for infantry soldiers, but can be carried by 2 soldiers. But you see how this is just a lot of work for something that takes a Russian light infantry company an afternoon to mine a 100 by 100 meter area, and it takes Ukraine an entire day, a whole Miklik, these very it's just a lot, man. It's very intensive, and there's not a lot of them. And that's the problem. It's not about can it be done. It's just the ease of planting a mine versus the difficulty of clearing it. It's just so asymmetrical. All right, somebody became a member. Oh, thanks, Slywalker. All right, and Mesties. Do you think USA will allow EU to give F-16 training to Ukrainian troops? I think they already have. Oh, when? Yeah, it's going to take a while, even if you're already a pilot. That's what they'll do. They'll use certified pilots. NATO Summit F-16 training. I swear I can spell. 4 days ago. Pilots, okay, there we go. First pilots expect to be trained by early 2024. There's your answer. Jake Andrew, any plans to have Jake Bro or Ryan Macbeth on the podcast? Man, my goal would be to get back on the podcast. I'd love to come on their podcast or on their show, talk to them about something. Yeah, they both seem like smart guys. They both seem to know what's up. There's not that many of us English language content creators in this war. And so I'm happy to help out, happy to also, yeah, they're good guys. They're legit. I'd be happy to collab with them on something. All right, Caesar asks, hey, Paul, love your content. Question, what logical steps would need to help for Ukraine to realistically push across the Dnieper and threaten Crimea? Honestly, they have to take Zaporizhzhia. Like, you can't do a river crossing. Unless for some reason there was just like an insanely dry season and somehow the whole Dnieper dried up. But even then, you can't count on that. You can't plan a military operation around waiting for a drought. Basically, it has to be done over land. You cannot make a river crossing when you need tens of thousands of people to do it, Okay. That was a lot of questions. You guys want to take a look at, since I don't think there's that much of an update, let's take a look at, let me see if just War Mapper has anything. War Mapper doesn't have anything new either. All right, let's take a look at some videos, man. Right? All right, here is, right, we're just gonna get demonetized. Oh, here is actually propaganda video from the Ministry of Defense of Russia. And this is depicting their paratroopers laying mines on paths that target Ukrainian vehicles. Now, to the YouTube algorithm gods, guys, please, for the love of God, it's troopers laying mines. I'm not going to show anything bad. But what we are going to do... Okay, so this is footage from the Russian MOD of paratroopers who are laying mines on paths that, Ukrainian vehicles travel on. We're going to talk a little bit about how mines are affecting the course of this war. And we're going to look at an on-the-ground level of how challenging it is to disrupt and destroy these mines and why they're such a problem for Ukrainian vehicles. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so you can see, again, this is Russian thermal sites, which is interesting because it means to me that they are probably operating at night. And Russia's not known for having night vision devices, so it makes me think maybe this is happening at like dusk. I can also tell you, I would not want to be laying mines in the dark because it is very easy to become slightly disoriented and travel towards the mines instead of away from the mines. And that's bad. So it's also possible that this is just during the day, but they're looking at it through these thermal sites simply to improve detection of the mines. Okay, so you can see here, these guys are... So I've pointed this out in other videos, that even like Russian thermal sites that are not nearly as good as the ones Ukrainians are operating in. I mean, look at the precision, look at the detail you can get. You can see the style of this guy's beard. This is, and you can see through foliage, like these are extremely precise, especially in questionable weather conditions in dusk. It's very, very effective. And so you can see, it looks like they are arming the mines, right, and installing a tripwire. Generally what you will see Russian forces do, they'll combine AT and AP mines, right? So Russian anti-tank mine, right? These are going to look like the cans of things. And then, right, we have Russian anti-personnel mine. right? So I just want to show you guys what we're looking at here. So if you're Russia, right, you're going to want lay what are called anti-personnel mines. These are like thought of as little butterfly mines. And this is sort of what they do, right? They are triggered by someone tapping these little feathers, basically. And they look like leaves, right? So they're meant to be planted in dense foliage. And you just tip the feather, and that's all it takes to set it off. So it's very sensitive, and it's very delicate. And it's not very powerful in terms of the world of munitions, but it's very deadly when it goes off, because it's only activated when someone is literally touching it. That's what makes it so scary, right? So when we look at anti-tank mines, right, these are different in some key ways. They take a lot of pressure to activate. They're designed not to be activated by human beings. You could, I wouldn't recommend it, but you could in theory stand on an anti-tank mine and like jump up and down, and you just wouldn't generate the force to activate it. Do so at your own risk. But you can see that the price of that, as you can see with this guy here, is that it means that you can clear these mines pretty easily if you're a light infantry soldier. You pick them up, you throw them somewhere. That's it. Unless they're surrounded by anti-personnel mines that you can't see. And so this was a common IED tactic, right? You'd have insurgents who would actually plant obvious IEDs or things that looked like obvious IEDs. And when our EOD teams would go to clear it, that's when the real IED, which was an anti-personnel mine, would go off. So that is the sort of danger that you see. And I think that's what these Russian forces are doing here. They are probably planting AP mines around an area that's already been laid with anti-tank mines. And again, it is really hard to see with this thermal sight what exactly is happening. This guy looks very hot. Really interesting that Russia would choose to release footage like this. I understand that they don't want their tactics to be known or exposed. But this is like very vague. This is like hard to discern, right? And it looks like he's armed it and thrown it. So yeah, it looks like he's winding it up, pulling it, and then tossing it. So I think this is probably another kind of maybe AP mine. This is really interesting. Let's see if we can figure out what sort of AP mine this is. Let's see if we can find like a Wikipedia article maybe. Or like anti-personnel mine types. Yeah, I think we can figure this out. Okay, here, look at this. So here is a photo. Let's see if we can open this image in a new tab. Oh, of PMN type of mines. All right, so it looks like he's deploying this kind of mine. You see how he's doing this winding and pulling something off and throwing it? This looks like the mine. So this says that from left to right, we're looking at a OZM, PMN4, PMN2, PMN1. So it looks like they're deploying either PMN4s or PMN1 mines. And this is an anti-personnel mine, again, that is going to be used. Probably these are also like step-on mines, you know? But let's see if we can learn more about the PMN1. Also kind of weird. PMN1 mine. How do you use it? Oh, yeah, PMN1. Yeah, I think this is it. Anti-personnel mines designed and manufactured in Russia, most widely used and commonly found devices in demining. PMN1 and 2. Okay, so it could be a PMN1 or a 2, actually, based on that sort of arming device. And yeah, total weight 600 grams. It's also got a stab-sensitive fuse, which means that if you're doing mine clearing, which you do generally with a knife very carefully, you're going to set this off. And of course, it's extremely dangerous to disarm PMN mines by removing the fuse, unless they've only been recently laid and in good condition. In this case, though, it's even hard to figure out which one they are. It's very easy to booby trap a PMN mine by attaching a pull fuse to it. or by placing an anti-handling device underneath it. Very, very, very dangerous stuff. So I think that's what we're seeing here. That looks about right. I see. Yeah, that looks like a small, and they're tossing them around, right? Even though it's tagged by the Russian MOD as them deploying mines against vehicles, you can see they're scattering all of these mines all over the field so that when Ukrainian troops try to clear them, they can't. I also want to point out what I think is really interesting that both sides have started doing is using these carabiners hooked into the molly webbing of their backplate. And that, I think, is as a carry handle, so that if they need to be dragged from an area, it's easier. And you can hook it into your own carabiner or hook it onto the front of your plate, and you could drag your battle buddy while keeping your hands free. That's my thesis anyway. There could be another use. You see what I mean? These guys are just mining the whole area. Look at how fast it is to deploy these mines and how incredibly hard it would be. I mean, imagine how long you'd have to work to get all these mines out. And they're deploying them in 30 minutes, right? And now we're looking at drone footage. Let me just see. Nope, there's stuff that explodes. Okay, we can't show this. But I will tell you what happens. It depicts Ukrainian... it's a drone observing Ukrainian tanks driving over the mines and hitting them. I don't know if they'll have personnel that also get hit. It's not clear. But you guys know what we're looking at here. Again, I can't show it for monetization regions, but it's not clear like a lot of Russian stuff. It's not super clear that it's the same area, but hopefully you understand that it's in a big wide field. And when you have these big wide fields, right, it's just so easy to deploy those anti-personnel mines, and it's so hard to clear. Anyway, guys, thanks for joining. Yeah, hopefully you learned something. Okay, sorry, I saw we had a bunch of chats there. That was pretty good. All right, C. Martin, thank you. I appreciate it. Aaron, I love it. Thanks for becoming a member. Paul Amos, also welcome. Philip Blanton, thank you. Let's see. Anybody else? Paulie says, I'm betting Russian lines collapse by September 1st. No reserves, starting to starve, worn out from not being rotated. That's true. All right. Without a general mobilization, Russia is having a hard time ginning up the necessary combat power, right? Okay. Agrams, why would you even tease footage if Cannon won't show it? Honestly, it's because I thought it was only going to be the deploying of the minefield. YouTube's terms of service will absolutely not let me show tanks hitting mines anymore. I know you're like, but Paul, you used to do that all the time. Dude, I know. And it's fine, I guess. It's YouTube. And honestly, even showing that, there's a medium chance this stream is already like demonetized. But it doesn't mean, it just means that it won't, that if you see ads, YouTube still runs ads on demonetized streams. They just don't let me have any of the money. Anyway, speaking of which, but if you do want the combat footage breakdowns, I do it, but I actually do it on my own site. That's why I launched combatvetnews.com. Obviously, everybody's visiting it right now. But this is my site. I give daily news updates on the Ukraine war, the stuff that I can't get to in my videos. I also have, of course, all my videos here. But if you want to support what I do, support the team that I got here, keep us independent, obviously watching the videos, tuning into the live streams, liking, commenting, all help. But if you really want to help support what I do, you can join, become a member at combatvetnews.com. Any one of these tiers will actually get you access to the members only content. And this is where once, sometimes twice a week, I will do analysis of the combat footage that really, I mean, you guys know that you can read a lot of analysis, you can look at the maps, but if you don't look at the footage, the actual stuff coming out of the ground of this conflict, you're going to miss key parts of it, right? We're seeing Ukrainian tactics evolving, right? Where they're being a lot more systematic in how they work through trenches. We actually watch them use these preparatory fires that we talked about. They're using, the Ukrainian forces actually use captured Russian thermobaric rocket launchers to soften up targets. And you can see the trench line they're targeting. So if you want that analysis, again, combatvetnews.com. It's again, the best way to support the channel, keep me independent. And I appreciate all you guys that are members, right? And Christopher Tucker, thank you. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about, let's see. Somebody asked, what is going on in Bakhmut? Well, the answer is, and has been for a while, I think. I think Bakhmut, interestingly enough, is one of the areas where, and I'll pull up a map here, where Ukraine has enjoyed the most success. And I'm going to pat myself on the back because for months I was saying that the place that Ukraine may want to consider for their offensive is the place that Russia hasn't spent the past 6 months building an incredible network of defensive positions. And as you can see here, right, if we take ourselves back in time, let's see if we can go back in time on the calendar. Right? If we go back to like June 1st, the map looks very different. Does it? No. Take me to June 1st. Doesn't want to. All right. Well, if we walk back through time, I mean, you can see that this is where the Ukrainian counteroffensive has actually been its most successful. And it's funny because in war, right, like a lot of things, it's a little bit like an economy. Right? Like if you believe a company is bad, then banks will charge more to loan them money, and the company will actually start to underperform, right? Similar things can happen in war. Bakhmut, not that important. Russia spent a huge amount of manpower attacking it. Ukraine spent a huge amount of manpower defending it because they thought they could attrit Russian forces. So it suddenly became the Battle of Bakhmut, an event. The event, actually, on the Eastern Front of the war. And then now, when Ukraine has to sit there and go, hey, where can we fight the Russians where they are going to be weakest? It's the area where they didn't do any preparation for the defense because they were totally focused on the offense. It's going to be in the area where their forces have only recently arrived because that's the only area where their forces have been gaining territory. It's Bakhmut. So suddenly, because Bakhmut was important to Russia, Bakhmut has become important to Ukraine in terms of it being a sensitive, soft area that they can attack. And I've been basically correct, right? That this is, when they pushed in Bakhmut, it's been the most successful point of their whole counteroffensive. Stephen Dooling, engineers from Germany have transferred radar technology to flying robots, enabling remote mine detection. Game changer. I would say at the surface, no, because this is technology that needs to be very matured. And finding the mines is only half the problem. You have to clear them efficiently. That's the other half of the problem. And that's a huge problem. You need, right? You have to think these mines cost nothing to build and deploy. That's the problem. You have to be able to clear them as fast and as cheap as you can deploy, or you need to clear them as fast and cheap as you can deploy them. And we watched literally in that 3-minute video, we watched like a dozen anti-personnel mines be deployed. So you need to find a way to clear a mine that's as easy as doing this. Arm it, toss it. Arm it, toss it. Right? So like that's the challenge. And that's why I think something like robotics, right? A autonomous device that doesn't need to rest or sleep or lose focus, just continuously around the clock scanning automatically and clearing mines without necessarily a lot of human input. That I think is the that will be the real game changer. Zeph Peterson, thank you. And whoa, we just had a whole bunch of people. I can't tell if that's an error in Streamlabs or did somebody gift a bunch of subs? Did somebody just gift a bunch of subs? That's so many subs. Zeph Peterson, I think you're right. I think Ukraine's primary focus is probably south in Kurdyumivka. But what's interesting is we saw today, Kurdyumivka and like in the north near the Burkiva Reservoir, Russia seems like it's switching units between the two. So Ukraine may be running like 1-2 punches, you know, where they hit hard in Kurdyumivka, Russia deploys forces to prevent a breakthrough, then they hit hard in Burkiva, Russia deploys forces to stop a breakthrough, and then they're slowly hitting from different angles until eventually Russia can't keep repositioning its forces and there is a larger breakthrough. Sorry, I can't tell if this is an error in stream elements or if someone gifted subs and I just didn't see it. I know that's a thing on YouTube now, but I want to, thank whoever did it, if indeed that's what happened. Putin donating subs. Yeah, that's fine, bro. Listen, I'll take Putin's money. It's on the mill bloggers right now. All right. We want to take a look. Let's see what time it is. Oh, it's 7. Okay. I can do one more video. What do you guys think? Yeah, Sir Lance Geo asks, what if they could build an insect-like swarm, like AI robots to clear the mines? That's actually what I think they're gonna do. Oh, is there some? Oh, okay. That's actually what I think they're gonna do. I think that's what it'll have to look like. Very cheap robots that talk to an AI brain elsewhere. Oh, there you go. Sly Walker gifted 5 Combat Vet Reacts memberships. Okay, thank you, Sly Walker. Interesting. Okay, so it's in green. Okay. Huh. All right, I'm learning how Stream Elements works. Thank you, dude. That was so cool. Yeah, okay, and there's a notification of everybody becoming a sponsor. Huh. Maybe someone did gift subs, but I didn't see it, right? You guys would tell me. I would definitely, thank whoever gifted a bunch of subs. As we should thank Sly Walker for gifting a bunch of subs. Yeah, maybe it was an error. Okay. All right. You want to take a look at Putin's spy master? And then we'll answer some last questions, and then I'll probably get out of here. Okay. Let's take a look at this video. It's a quick profile of who is Ukraine's spy master. What does it mean to be the spy master of Ukraine? Let's do it.
Ukraine's intelligence chief is on a mission to win the information war. Kirilo Budanov runs the country's spy operations. But
okay, talking about information war. All right, I think they're misusing terms. This is a classic thing that irks me with reporters. Information operations and spying are different things. Okay, and right. Let me pull it up. Military doctrine, information operations. And then we look at military doctrine, intelligence gathering, right? Now, intelligence gathering is what you think of as spying, right? Using technologies or, okay. Let's see. Intelligence operations, executive summary, creators leadership. Oh my God, I hate when there's a gazillion things. I just want you to define it. I should be using Bard for this, honestly. Okay, here we go. Let's take a look. All right, So, what is intelligence? Intelligence is information gathered within or outside your country that involves threats to the nation, its people, property, or interest, development, proliferation, or use of weapons of mass destruction, or any other matter bearing on your country's national security. Right? Intelligence can provide insights not available elsewhere that warns of potential threats, opportunities, assesses probable outcomes of proposed policy options, and provide leadership profiles on foreign officials and inform official travelers of counterintelligence and security threats. That's intelligence. Intelligence is knowing things, okay? It is knowing things. Information operations are a little different. Information operations, also known as influence operations, include the collection of tactical information about an adversary, as well as the dissemination of propaganda in pursuit of a competitive advantage over an opponent. And they're using the word propaganda, but remember, propaganda doesn't have to be fake. It can be real. It can be true information, but that presents the side that you want presented.
The 37-year-old spy master has built up an unusually public profile since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Widely circulated official videos back up the theory that the work of a spy boss cannot stay in the shadows.
So this is what I think is really interesting, is that he's obviously doing influence operation. Right? Releasing public videos and is a huge part of that in this instance. And they realize that you may notice that in the definition of information operations that we looked at, right, it didn't say who, right? It just said the dissemination of propaganda. It didn't say who it was to, and it was just in pursuit of a competitive advantage. So remember, dissemination of propaganda in pursuit of a competitive advantage, that describes pro-Ukrainian content where the audience is the public of an allied country. It describes information that's disseminated to persuade elected officials of an allied country to support Ukraine, right? That is also giving them a competitive advantage, obviously having strong allies who are committed to helping you. And I say this because, yes, some of what they do is almost certainly targeted at Russia, but that is going to be Russian language content, right? It would be written in Cyrillic. I wouldn't know how to Google it if I tried. I wouldn't be able to Google it because I don't think they have Google in Russia. But this guy also understands that a strategic objective of Ukraine is to ensure the support of Western countries. And inherent to that is making sure the voters of those countries see and understand why Ukraine should be supported, how their tax dollars are supporting Ukraine, right? Like I said, the wars of influence, man. This is a guy, this is like the CIA director being like, hey, just as important as spying on other countries is our ability to communicate this important message about what we're doing to others. And the fact that is seen as just as important as gathering intelligence on your adversary and influencing your allies are equally important tasks is really pretty incredible to me. An incredible change in warfare. Does that make sense? Again, this is why I talk about the fact that, like, this is a weird, and there's a Russian version of this guy. There are Russian versions of people putting out pro-Kremlin talking points with the objective of influencing the U.S. public, the public in Western Europe, and influencing Russia's allies, those who are supporting it.
This is the conflict of the 21st century. All the conflicts of the 21st century, by the way, have been defined by colossal work in the mass media field.
I want to point something out also. One of the things that I think is fascinating is sometimes you end up putting young people in charge, and they fundamentally leapfrog forward an organization, right? And this guy's 37. He's my age, and he's running this war in a way that is sort of unthinkable, right? And you have to think, you look at previous CIA directors, these are guys in their 60s. They're almost always guys, and they're always almost guys in their 60s. And they come up from the Cold War era. They have this extremely Cold War mentality about what they do. They have an extremely, sometimes almost childlike fixation on doing things the old school way. And it's true in the intelligence community. It's true in the military community, right? You have these old generals who are just stuck, who absolutely cannot conceive of a world in which you can't have a tank charge, or you can't have an unmanned fight. You can't have where fighting a war means having tankers and tanks and fighter pilots and fighter jets zooming around going pew pew. And it's like, listen, sorry, like this isn't how this warfare is.
Budanov says he has sources close to Russian President Vladimir Putin. He noted, without providing evidence, that he accurately predicted Russia would invade before the full-scale war broke out in February 2022. He also cited an intercepted survey conducted by the Russian Interior Ministry that apparently showed the mutinying mercenary boss Yevgeny Prigozhin had support inside Russia.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, okay, one, it's always sort of annoying, and I do it too, when you look back and you're like, look at all these things I got right. And then like the things you got wrong, you kind of dismiss. But again, as we talked about, this guy acknowledges that this is a puff piece. This is a propaganda piece. And it doesn't matter. It matters a little bit if it's true. But what he wants to do is he's amplifying some of these points. If he's following a Western playbook, Western influence operations, generally what they do is they produce true, verifiable facts that are cherry-picked to shape a narrative. That's sort of the Western way. Russia, in contrast, it has the Soviet-style information operations where they try to, like, they basically treat the information space the way they treat the battle space. They flood it with mines, they flood it with information. Some of it's true, some of it's not. It just becomes really hard to discern anything real about what's going on.
We have our own sources in the closest office to Putin, so as to say. This is why we usually know what's going on, and we find out ahead of time, not reading it in the news.
Budanov began his military career as a special forces operative. He served in the East after Russia illegally annexed Crimea in 2014. Since he took charge of the spy service in 2020, there have been numerous failed attempts on his life.
I mean, this is crazy also, just to be like, all right, you're a special forces guy, you're supporting the invasion in 2014, like, and in 10 years, you end up in charge of your country's intelligence and influence operation. That is a crazy trajectory. Probably a sign that this dude's either well-connected or brilliant or possibly both. Again, I think that it's part of hopefully a younger generation that like comes up in this conflict in Ukraine that really enables them to that have enabled them to think differently about war. We see a lot of these young brigade commanders too. And I think a lot of their innovations, a lot of the ways they solve battlefield problems, they think differently than someone. I mean, it's no secret. If you spend 2 decades in one institution, especially like the military, you got to think, if you're a civilian, right? And you're like a really smart, let's say you graduate from like an Ivy League school, what's your career going to look like? You're going to go into consulting, then maybe you'll go into like a government position for a couple of years, then maybe you'll pivot out of that and work for like an NGO, and then maybe you'll go back into like a business role, you'll maybe work for a tech startup, and like by the time you're at your year 20 of your career, you're like, wow, I've worked a ton of different places, seen a ton of different cultures, you know, and you come with this rich sense of experience about what's possible and how the world works. But if you're in the military, you don't have that option. You have no choice but to spend 20 years in one institution that has prescribed to the year exactly what your career is going to do. And then the military is shocked when all its officers, senior officers, think the same way, think with no creativity, take no risks. They're extremely conservative and extremely in love with themselves. That's who you've created. The problem is that they fight every war like the old way, you know?
Budanov has seen his popularity and public profile surge inside Ukraine during the war, where he is portrayed as a behind-the-scenes mastermind of efforts to strike back at Russia.
I love the bowl of candy.
But in Russian media, he is a hate figure. Moscow has blamed Ukraine's secret services for the murders of a pro-war Russian blogger and a journalist. Kiev denies any involvement. Russian media reported that a Moscow court had arrested Budanov in absentia on terrorism charges. The idea of a spy agency sending assassins to hunt down Ukraine's enemies has drawn comparisons with Israel's Mossad.
I mean, people are like, wow, this is unprecedented. Dude, Russia poisoned a dissident, also a former intelligence officer, living in the UK in like 2016. Like on UK soil, which is itself absolutely preposterous. But they do it, right? This is very standard Russian playbook stuff. And the fact that Ukraine is willing to target pro-Russian influencers is a testament to the fact of what this guy thinks, right? Like, again, the war of influence is real. You know, I had a friend be like, oh, why don't you go to Ukraine? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, Russia may want to retaliate for what they believe is their pro-Russian bloggers being targeted by Ukraine.
Budanov doesn't resist the analogy.
А порівняння з Моссадом, у всіх свої підходи свої.
As for the comparisons with Mossad, everyone has their own approach and methods.
Ви питаєте про сторону того, що Моссад відомий тим, що...
If you're asking about Mossad as being famous for eliminating enemies of their state, then we are doing it, and we will be doing it.
Нам не потрібно щось створювати.
I mean, that's pretty cagey. Listen, whatever you think about Mossad, they are very, very good. They are one of the best intelligence agencies in the world. Again, they have to be. They just have to be. So, you know, I point this stuff out because you got to learn. There's different ways there's different ways to do this sort of stuff, right? And as you see, when you're a country's intelligence arm, you got to do intelligence gathering, you got to do information operations, you got to do some direct action. That's how it is. That's what is expected. And the ratio and how this works.
Ну, а всі ті, хто намагався нас залякати,
Everyone who tries to scare us, hoping it will make an impact, you will regret all of this very soon. Our response will be imminent. Just wait and see.
чекайте, скоро всі все побачать.
So one of the things I want to point out that he has that I think is kind of cool is a painting here. It's actually depicting Ukrainian forces. It looks like loading a casualty onto a Kazakh helicopter. You could see, interestingly, they have even the blue and yellow tape. And I like this detail. And it's not an accident. Like, please understand that these pieces, these propaganda parts, are staged, right? He could have cleaned up his desk, but he didn't want to. He wanted to look busy, like he's doing work. And you may notice that there's not actually any papers facing up. There's no writing that you can discern. Like, looks like maybe the staples. That's about it. So he wants to look like he is constantly busy projecting that image. Right? He's got his four different phones, which I think is pretty funny. He obviously has what looks like some awards here and here. He's got a picture of Zelensky, and of course, prominently, this picture reminding him of the reality of war, right? The dirty messiness. And again, I think there's something really, really, if your goal is to build a really good organizational leader, you want them to get experience at the bottom and understand the gritty reality on the ground, and you have to build them up to like, you have to sort of layer their experience, right? They have to get it from a lot of different places, and you build someone who has a great perspective of the whole organization from top to bottom, right? The only problem is when you do that, it's very effective, But the risk is that you have someone who's very myopic, who only thinks in the way that your institution thinks. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Okay, let's see what questions you guys have for me. All right, we had a bunch of super chats. Mesty, Russia has more people to attack Ukraine and air superiority and bombs. How does Ukraine win currently? First off, it does not have air superiority. Air superiority means you cannot be opposed. Your aircraft can fly unopposed. That's not the case. Russian aircraft are under constant threat. They've had to really scale back their tactics to be effective. I think Ukraine wins, again, by draining Russian reserves, probably achieving territorial gains in the model of when they took Kherson, which is they pressure Russian forces, pressure Russian logistics, and so that when they do push, Russian forces kind of fall apart pretty quickly. Let's see what else. Noogle Minus says, Google IEEE Spectrum metal detecting drone. Okay, sure. We'll punch it in real quick. Real quick. All right. But obviously, gotta make sure. Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, metal detecting drone could autonomously find landmines. 5 degrees of freedom can safely detect buried objects from the air. Yeah, interesting. That would be a good thing if they pinged it and were able to send the location back to an AI and then have another drone go out and detonate it. Yeah, that's like pretty simple, but the best innovations often are. So I'm into it. I think that's pretty cool. Okay, one final shout out, as always, guys. I mean, I'll answer some questions if you got them, certainly. Let me, hit me up in the chat. I did want to shout out because there's been some new viewers that have popped in. CombatVetNews.com. It's the #1 way to support the channel. Obviously, YouTube routinely demonetizes my content. Sponsors are hard to come by because they don't like the war, but I believe in this analysis. I think what I do is important for, it's in many cases y'all's taxpayer money that's going to support this war. You should understand really what's going on. And so I launched CombatVetNews.com. For free, you can get all these news stories that I can't get to. All my YouTube videos are on here for free. But if you want to really support what I do, you can become a member. Any one of these membership tiers is going to get you access to the members-only content, and that's the only place that we watch the uncensored combat footage from the front lines. Gives us insight that we can't get anywhere else. So please, if you want to support what I do, combatvetnews.com really is the place to do it. I obviously appreciate you guys, regardless whether you're liking the video, whether you're subscribed, when you watching the videos, all of that makes a massive, massive difference. Truly. Again, I'm not somebody with big sponsorship deals. I'm not somebody with a ton of, like love from YouTube, so to speak. But I don't need it because I have you guys. I get love from you guys, from the fans. I don't want to say fans, people who also care about Ukraine, care about this analysis. All right. Any last minute questions? Let's see. Thanks, Paul Amos. I appreciate all you guys that became members, too, and gifted all the memberships. That was fun. That was cool. All right, guys. I think that's it. I'm going to get out of here. Thank you guys so much.